is a great person to ask some of those economic questions you had at the start of the workshop. Counselors, thank you for your time. Thank you for engaging, and thank you for doing your background research. Very appreciated. Have a good day. Miles, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes. Now, counselors have a copy of your reporting dashboard that you sent me yesterday afternoon. And we will hand this over to you now.
Thank you. Can you still hear me?
Yes, yes. We can hear you and see you.
Yes, it's flicking in and out. It's just, I'm just getting an empty council chair half the time.
Yes, that's because the camera only moves to where we have the mic on, and when it doesn't, by default, it goes to the throne.
Okay.
The mayor's chair. Sorry. He's not here.
Okay. Can you just pause it?
Can you still hear me?
Miles, we just have one question. When you sent us the report, you had a disclaimer on the front page of it, on the title page, the small writing under June 2023.
Oh, yes, we have that on all of them. I mean, that's, we just have that in case councils don't want to release it, so there's no problem at our end.
Okay, great, because this is an open workshop that is being live streamed.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Right, so Miles, I think we're all good from our side.
Right. Good morning, and look, thank you for having me here. You can hear me still all right?
Yes, yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah, it's a bit funny when it goes to, it's a bit odd when it just goes to an empty chair and then there's nothing happening. So you've got the report in front of you?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. So look, shall I just take the report as read because the economic commentary, because there's quite a bit that's happened since then. So I can go through it, or I could just say, well, as I say, I could just take it that it's read, and I could take questions, and I could update you. It's your choice on that one.
Miles, I know that some counselors had some questions because we had gone over some of the background data through our own analysis from what came out through Infometrics and New Zealand Stats, et cetera, et cetera. So would you be open to taking some questions that they had now, please?
I can take them now, or yes, that's fine, or I can provide the update.
Okay. Okay. Counselors, over to you. Would you like to ask them the questions you had earlier?
Yeah, sure. I actually do just have a question on the report for a start, if you don't mind. On page 5, I think it is, next to the interest rate risk, you've got current percentage of debt fixed at 78.5 and current percentage of debt floating at 100. Can you just explain that, how that works to me, please?
Sorry, that's probably a typo. I don't know how that one got through. I didn't spot that. My apologies. Not a good beginning. The current percentage of debt fixed is 78%. So that's the top of the green line. So on the debt and cover graph, the blue is the fixed rate debt, and the shaded blue and the shaded green are the swaps. Now, in total, that means that you have 78.5% of the debt fixed, and that equates to 161 million. So the current percentage of debt floating, I don't know what happened there. It's these metrics didn't feed through. Should be 21.5%.
That's okay, thanks.
So
Sorry, so then my question that I had earlier on, which you'll probably include in your update, was that we had a lot of commentary in our previous report about increasing cost still and infrastructure spend and things like that, yet there seems to be a feeling that we've reached peak infrastructure kind of, and that those costs may decrease. So just wondering if you had any commentary on what your view is around where infrastructure costs are going in the future.
Well, I'm not actually hearing that they are decreasing. Now, at the last the LGFA Borrowers Day in Wellington in late July, there was I think the project manager of Infrastructure New Zealand was speaking, and he was talking about the continuing increased costs of infrastructure, and that they seem to they certainly they have been going up very sharply, but he wasn't giving any indication that they were actually declining. That perhaps the cost of infrastructure was going higher and higher still, and I mean we've known in the Christchurch Stadium here what the increased cost of that was. And that is a fixed rate cost, but that has gone up considerably. So I'm actually not hearing that the cost of infrastructure is going down. I mean, oil costs, which are quite an important part of a lot of those. I mean, they have gone up again. So I'm not seeing that. No.
Just a comment on that. A couple of councillors and I were in Christchurch yesterday to view the Netzel Stadium, and we spoke afterwards with Apollo, and interesting to hear from the owner there. He spoke of steel and some of their construction prices coming down, didn't he? And they're doing some major projects across the country, so that we did hear that as of yesterday, which was nice, with a big capital program ahead of us. But to your point, maybe it's only well, I'm not sure, maybe it sits in part of the industry, or is it just a rort and we're just getting local government's an easy one to
I guess, just Councillor Booth, I mean, I've been out in the market just recently looking for professional services. It's been in Christchurch mainly, but certainly the services are having to compete for the pool of business there, and that has been reflected in some decreases in costs, and that's basically supply and demand, and obviously companies realising they actually need to be competitive and are having to compete for business, because people perhaps aren't doing those projects as they had been at the speed that had been, and then probably due to the cost of money. So I guess in regards to the cost of money for Timaru District, what's our interest rate? Have you done any sort of analysis on how much interest we're going to be paying, say, within the next 5 years, what we're paying now, and what, as our swaps come off and mature, and we're taking on new debt at 6% or 6+. Have you done any analysis based on our current borrowings, what that interest effect will have on our numbers that we require to rate our share or our ratepayers.
On the report, on that same page 5, there is an interest rate projection. So underneath, so on the bottom left of page 5, the slide that's headed interest rate risk, it does actually give a projected cost of funds. And the line to look at is the solid blue line, which starts just under 4%. So what that's showing is that your all-up weighted average cost of funds, including your margin, and that's in the metrics column on the right, is 3.89%. And it does give a few, but what it actually shows here is that your interest costs don't actually, well, it's actually showing that you're at peak interest costs at the moment, but there's actually going to be very little change over the next 5 years or so. And what this graph does, it takes your current level of fixed rate debt and the swaps and the fixed rate bonds that you've got, because your fixed rate cover is determined by the fixed rate bonds plus the swaps. And where you don't have fixed rate cover, and that is in the graph above it, that's the shaded grey area. So everything above the green line is where you don't have cover going forward, and it takes the market's projected track for the floating rate out that far and produces that graph. So this gets a wee bit complicated, but if you look at the interest rate projection graph, it's that mustard coloured line, the very top line, and that's the market's projected track for the floating rate, plus it adds on the margin that you pay for your debt. It's got a weighted average margin, and you can see that shows that the cash rate might the market linked floating rate forecast. That's the 90-day rate forecast, and it adds your margin on. It shows that it might go up slightly, and then it comes down quite sharply, and that's with the Reserve Bank presumably cutting the cash rate, and that has been pushed out to in the last monetary policy statement 2 weeks ago, they pushed it out from late 24 to early 25. I can come on to that in a minute. But you might ask, well, why, when the floating rate is coming down and we haven't got cover further out, does our interest rate not go down accordingly? That's because you have lower priced fixed rate bonds coming off. So, some of and some swaps, some of them are in the ones, have a 1 in front of them. So the net effect of it is that your interest cost will be virtually, based on the projected track for the 90-day rate, your interest cost will be unchanged going out the next 5 years or so. It's not perfect. I mean, it's only perfect if the future floating rate followed that projected track exactly over the next 5 years, and we know that financial markets aren't. They can't predict with 100% accuracy what interest rates will do. It's only factoring in what we know at the moment.
So is that that's a snapshot of our current debt? Is that taking into consideration our anticipated debt that we're with our capital projects look going forward?
It's taking into account the increased debt. So in that graph above it, it shows the debt going up to about 300 million. So it does take account of the future debt as well. Yes, it does factor that in.
Thank you.
Do you want to carry on, Miles, then?
Right. Just as far as I think it might be worthwhile just to update you as to what's happening, economically, because there is an awful lot happening at the moment. So we've had the cash rate go up. It's one of the biggest increases we've had in the cash rate. It went from 0.25 to 5.5% in a very short space of time. People have said to me, well, why haven't we got more fixed rate cover? And we should have seen this coming. No one saw this coming because this was the unknown and the unintended consequence of COVID. We haven't had COVID before. There was no playbook written for COVID, and when government started pouring huge amount, trillions of dollars into the global financial system to counter the the downside effects of COVID and the economic downside effects of COVID. They didn't realise that it was going to be inflationary, and the inflation, has absolutely rocketed up as a result of that. But we have actually got, the inflation rate in New Zealand's come down from 7.2, 7.3, we're down at 6%. The US is coming down. I mean, I think we have passed peak inflation. The Reserve Bank of New Zealand was one of the first to raise the cash rate, although the second one in the Western world, behind South Korea, I think, or the economic developed countries, and we're probably one of the first to stop. Now, at the moment, the Reserve Bank did project a wee while ago that 5.5% would be the peak, and in the last two statements they paused, and so they've had two pauses now at that 5.5%, and they believe that will be the peak. The markets are actually factoring in a 62% chance that there will be another rise to 5.75%. I don't actually believe it'll happen. The one thing that is a little bit maybe perplexing a bit, is that they have said that we will, and when they were raising the cash rate, that I know that raising the cash rate is going to have an effect on the economy, and they actually said a few months ago, we actually want a recession. So they actually want the economy to slow down, and they want the inflation rate to come down, and the way to get it down is to slow the economy, slow consumption, slow spending. So it's a fairly unusual statement from a central bank to say we want a recession to get the inflation rate down. Now, they have been very, very dogmatic in saying that we don't care if the result of pushing the cash rate from 0.25 to 5.5% and then holding it there for a year, if the end result of that is going to be a recession, so be it. We actually want one. But I just think that, well, this is my view, the markets are saying that we'll have the first cash rate cuts in August or September. The Reserve Bank have now pushed it back to January next year. It's next year. The Reserve Bank pushed it out to January 25, as I said earlier. I just think when the extent of the economic slowdown actually materialises and they see what trouble the country's in at the moment, that I think that they won't be able to stand in the way of that, and I think it'll actually come back earlier than that. Our concern at the moment, and I don't want to sound like I'm a doomsayer, but we're just concerned about what the economy is going to be like in the next year or so. We are in recession at the moment. We're in the technical definition of a recession. The Reserve Bank, in the monetary policy statement, forecast that we would have positive growth in the June quarter, because we don't get the June quarter figures till the end of September. But then we'd come out of recession, then we go back into it for the September and December quarters. But just talking to people and talking to clients, and I think we shouldn't underestimate what's happening in China at the moment and the effect of the slowdown in China. It's having a big effect on our dairy prices. Obviously, Fonterra drastically, have significantly cut down the forecast, and that's going to have a very big effect. I mean, we're already hearing in rural service centre towns, I don't know what it's like in Timaru, and they certainly are one with dairying, that there is, from the rural servicing perspective, things are slowing down quite considerably. So, as I say, I'm probably sounding quite negative and quite pessimistic, but we're just concerned about what will happen over the next year or so, and I have a feeling that interest rates will actually come off sooner than what the markets and the Reserve Bank are projecting. Are there any questions on that?
Doesn't look like it, no. Oh, sorry.
Scott Shannon, councillor. Not a question on that specifically, but looking at page 7 with your LGFA borrowing rates. Now, I'm one of the school that don't believe that Three Waters will be happening in the next year. I'm banking on some good news on October the 14th. But if local government assets, so large as our Three Water assets, weren't on our books across the country, how could that affect the LGFA's projected ability to, I suppose, offer the interest rates that are in front of us now and the reduced assets on each individual TA?
So you were saying if Three Waters did go ahead,
Yes.
and that if your debt was reduced,
You know, your asset base, and across the country, and LGFA.
yeah. So if the asset base was reduced, though, the debt would reduce as well, because you've got a certain amount of your debt. How much is it, Andrea, that's associated with Three Waters?
It's about 100 million.
So, I mean, it's not just that your asset base would reduce. I mean, presumably your debt would reduce by 100 million. I haven't done the numbers. I haven't got the numbers for Timaru, but it does vary from council to council. Some are in a better position because the debt is bigger than the decrease in the debt is bigger than the decrease in the assets. Sometimes it's the other way around. But so there's going to be a corresponding decrease in both your debt and your assets. It's not going to affect the ability of the LGFA to borrow and to offer the rates that are currently available. So no, it won't have any effect at all. What will be the interesting point is how these new entities, the 10 entities, will be funded, and DIA and the NTU, the National Transition Unit, for all the money that they've spent, they still haven't come up with that. There's at least 8 billion of debt there. I mean, I'm a wee bit surprised about it. And they were asked about that at the local government, the LGFA Borrowers Day back in July, and they didn't really seem to have an answer for it. They said, "Well, we are working on it." Well, I would have thought that, you know, if supposedly the first, you know, the first inception date is what, 1 July 24 for NTA, that they would actually know more about that by now, but they're not. My personal view is it's not going to happen in its current form and on the current dates. I mean, because I think that, you know, National Act will get in, and that will lead to. I mean, the water reforms will go ahead, and National have actually said that, but they'll be in a different form, and I think they'll actually have to push it back because it'll be a whole new template that they're going to be operating under.
Yeah, one of the things, Councillor Shannon, in terms of the borrowing, is we borrow, so we can borrow 2.1, self-imposed limit 2.1 times our revenue. The question in part, which I don't know that we've had an answer from, and I don't know that LGFA have been asked specifically or turned their mind to it, is will that ratio remain the same? Now, if we've got, we get about 27 million, Andrew, from water, is that correct, one way or another? So if we get that sort of a number and we multiply it by 2.1, but we forfeit 100 million of debt, theoretically, if it were to proceed, we would in the initial period be better off because we would release more debt than our headroom would go up. So we're better off. We'd have more capacity at one level if you look at it. But that assumes makes quite a number of assumptions about what will happen to our ability to borrow at 2.1 times our revenue, what debt they'll take and in what time frame and so on. And there's quite a lot built into that. But the modelling we've done would indicate we're not likely to be worse off if it were to go ahead, but there's a lot of ifs and assumptions in there.
So what you're saying there, Pete, is that your actual debt to revenue will decrease. Your debt to revenue ratio will decrease under Three Waters.
Yeah, that's correct, Miles. Yeah.
Councillors, there is a workshop at 1 p.m. today to actually go over the financial implications of Three Waters, so some of those questions may be answered for you at that time.
But Miles, it also assumes that you can still borrow at 2.1 or 2.x or something your revenue, and that LGFA doesn't say, having lost your water stream revenues, they're going to change those borrowing limits.
They haven't said that at all. I've been keeping quite close contact with them, and they haven't indicated.
Yeah, no, that's right. But that's one of the assumptions embedded in it.
Yeah. Is there anything else in the report that you'd like me to go through? I think it's reasonably self-explanatory, most of it. On slide 4, it does give you a maturity profile that shows that you've got a good spread of maturities. It gives your total debt and then the headroom that you've got available, the net debt, your liquidity ratio is 120%, your policy compliant, you've actually got a good hedging profile. There is no need to take out more fixed rate cover at the moment. Sorry, and I'm just going forward to slide 5 here. Maybe I just should point this out, is that where that green line, the top of that green line, it can't breach the bottom red line. You've got, you're not getting close to it. You've got plenty of time. It'll be at least a year before you have to take out any further hedging, when I think interest rates will be lower. So you're actually in quite a good position. Your cost of funds is actually one of the is at the lower end of the spectrum as far as local government goes. There are quite a number that are above 4%. We actually just inherited the client from someone else, and they were at 6%. A new client. I think your actual cost of funds is, well, you would be in the bottom 25%, the bottom quartile. What I'm going to do, actually, I haven't had time to do it yet, is that I'm going to go through and do a scattergram of different cost of funds outcomes for councils. It won't be, there'll be no attribution associated with it, so it won't say who is who, but you'll know where you are.
The policy band, going back to page 5, is that the local government policy band, or is it actually our own? Sorry?
That's your one.
So
the policy bands are in that bottom right-hand rectangle. So it's split into 3 bands: 0 to 2 years, 2 to 4, and 4 to 8. A minimum of 40%, a maximum of 100, and that 0 to 2, and then 20%, and then 80%, and then 0 to 60. So that's the one that is very typical, the ones we use across our local authority client base, and we have about 35 local authority clients in New Zealand.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do you want to, is there anything else you'd like to cover, Miles?
Sorry, what was that?
Is there anything else you'd like to cover?
No, I think I've covered it all. I mean, you know, the big unknown is Three Waters, and I just can't, overestimate the importance of it. I mean, I don't think you're in that position, but I mean, there are some local authorities that have said to me, if we don't get the Three Waters debt repaid, we're in trouble. So, just the time that it's taken and the lack of clarity that we've got around it, and the fact that this might all change again, and all the work that's being done will be for nothing, is well, I think it's heartbreaking, for some councils. But you are in a good position. I mean, actually, one thing that might be interesting, although I've only just got it this morning. I just found it. I just had a thought this morning. It shows the debt to revenue of all the different councils. The LGFA provided me with this. It is only at June 22 that we're putting out the June 23 ones when they get through all the annual reports. Do you want me to tell you where you stand?
Yes, please.
So of the rated local authorities, you had, this is at 30 June, you had 116, debt to revenue was 116%, the average was 91.2%, so you were slightly higher. But then you've got ones like, you've got Auckland, you've got Christchurch, you've got Hamilton, you've got Tauranga. Tauranga's at 200%. You've got Auckland at 212%. You've got Christchurch at 135%. Kapiti at 174%. Wellington City 149%. So you're a little bit above the average, but not dramatically so. When I've got the latest, when the LGFA produce the latest numbers, I'll send them to you.
Sorry, Miles, just don't want to be too pedantic. Is that the average or the median? So the median would be 91, is it? So there's sort of half above 91% and half below, is it? Or is that an average?
They're saying it's the average.
Okay.
The figure that I've got is the average, yeah.
All right, thanks.
Funnily enough, the average actually for the non-rated local authorities is, 36%. So it's considerably lower for the non-rated ones. When some of the reasons that the councils get the rating is so that they can increase that threshold, because it goes from 175% maximum to 280%.
Just going to page 8 and looking at the borrowings and the maturities. Are they like we've just stated, the last one there appears to be 15th April 30. So when did we borrow that money? Was that 10 years ago, or there was no establishment dates? Because
Just a minute, please. If you just give me a minute, I can. Sorry, I'll just see if I can find it.
yeah, and I guess you've got it's a FRN, 6.22 yield margin 0.67. So does that mean it's you take the 0.67 off that number, or it's
Sorry, I just get to the. I think I've just found it. The answer to the first question. I'm just going to go back through a couple of spreadsheets.
Miles, what we could do is actually have you come back to Andrea with the answer, and when we meet again at 1 o'clock, we can provide that to Councillor Booth, if that helps.
Yeah, I thought I would just give me 2 minutes. Just give me 30 seconds.
No problem.
My computer's just going slow at the moment. No, I'll get back to you on that one.
that's
I'll get as soon as I hang up, then I'll be able to find it. I can actually probably email it through to Andrea.
Yes.
And sorry, what was the second question?
well, just capital repayments. Say for instance, when that matures, do we have to pay the $10 million back, or is actually are we paying payments? Is that being paid? So, say for instance, it's over a period of 10 years. Will that be down to zero? The balance be down to zero in 10 years' time? As in, are we paying interest plus capital off our loans?
No. So all the capital is paid. The principal is paid at maturity. So you're paying interest on it on a floating rate note. You're paying interest every quarter. On a fixed rate bond, you're paying every 6 months.
So we're not paying. So we're not paying any capital back then.
No. So when these most of the time when these mature, then they're refinanced. Because otherwise, I mean, your debt would just be going down and down and down.
So
When there's an increasing need for debt.
don't we borrow for projects, and then we actually pay the interest and we pay the things back over, say, 20 years, or perhaps depending on what type of infrastructure it is, back over 10 years? So you're saying we're not paying any capital back as such?
Or not paying any LGFA capital back, I'm not sure. That the only visibility I have is what the LGFA debt is. Whether that's been replaced with capital from other business from the other business units, I'm not sure. Andrea, you're probably better positioned to make comment on that. Internally, you might be paying back particular projects or business units.
So look, what happens is we borrow, our treasury functions are managed at a corporate level, and so various projects might be getting paid down, but then we're borrowing money for further projects. So we might be, Andrew's not here, but if you take something like Aorangi Road and the Millie Screen, that gets paid down, but then we borrow for the Pariora pipeline. So we manage it at a global level, but projects themselves are getting repaid, but council, in addition to its depreciation, borrows to fund its capital work. So when we're increasing capital work significantly as we have, then our borrowings will increase as well. But we do build into the rate repayments of capital previously borrowed for projects.
Is there any other?
So I've just found the answer to that one. The two floating rate notes that were each for 10 million were borrowed. One was borrowed on the 13th of June 22 and the other on the 15th of August 22. So the two ones you can see at 30, yeah, they were borrowed in mid-2022.
Just one question that you may be able to help me with. Do you have recommended life periods that you should pay infrastructure down by?
No, that's not really part of our brief. We come in at the point where the debt has been determined by the council, and so we're asked to provide the debt. We're asked to manage the debt. So we manage the treasury function. We're not involved, in the steps prior to that involves the strategy and the financial position that goes into the acquiring of that debt.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other questions? Comments? Is there anything else you'd like to add, Miles?
No, I think that probably covers it all. Apologies for not being able to be there today, but I'm office bound today and off to Invercargill tomorrow. I had a meeting in Christchurch which I couldn't get out of, so apologies for that.
Thank you for your time. I'm sure we might get you back at some point. I know you said you could talk for hours on these topics, so I'm sure.
I could.
I'm sure it might be beneficial at some point in time. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that'll be fine. Look forward to that.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, and we appreciate your election prediction as well.
I was sitting next to Christopher Luxon on a plane the other day.
Oh, good.
And
That's very good.
he was quietly confident.
Okay, righto. Thanks very much. Appreciate that, Miles.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.
Yes, councillors, I think it's breaking for lunch now. Okay. Yes, back at 1 o'clock.